All right, so I'm starting the recording now. So welcome all to our Coach PD on, as an example, debate round for this year's topic, specifically the first case on the federal jobs guarantee. So Douglas and Josh are going to be the affirmative side in the debate, and Rainer and myself will be the negative side. And we're going to just give you an example of some arguments. We'll record the debate as well so people can watch it later and use it hopefully in your debate practices as well. Again, we're going to give very short untimed speeches, less than 3 minutes per speech. And just the goal is to provide some example arguments that could be made on this topic, some example questions, that kind of thing. And if you're a student watching this debate, there is no right or wrong way to make arguments with any of these particular pieces of evidence. Like however creative you want to be. The arguments we'll be making are just going to be an example, and they're not going to be perfect. So don't feel like you need to copy them. Just hopefully we can give you some ideas and help you get a better understanding of the case. Josh and Douglas, do you want to decide who's going to go first and just give the 1AC?
Douglas, it's up to you. I'm indifferent.
Sure, I propose Josh goes first. It's the pro. I'll just swap.
Cool.
Josh, you go first then.
All right. Let me pull up the evidence real quick. This is why I wish I had doing all of this, or I had mine activated. But...
And Josh, what I'm going to do is just try and share the evidence packet while you're reading so that in the recording, people can see the evidence that you'll be reading while it's going.
Okay.
So I'm going to share the evidence packet now. Can people see this okay?
I can see it.
Okay, so what I'll just ask you to do, Josh, is as you go, just tell us what page you're going to be reading from.
The page number. All right, I'm gonna start at page 5. Yep.
Great.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Hi, my name is Josh Nixon. I represent the affirmative, and I work for the Boston Debate League as a program manager. So right now, more than 500,000 people on page 5. Sorry, more than 500,000 people are homeless in the United States. D'Souza, 2022. On a single night in 2022, roughly 582,500 people were experiencing homelessness in the United States. 4 in 10 were in unsheltered locations. People who identify as Black make up just 12% of the United States population, but comprise 37% of all people experiencing homelessness, and 50% of people experiencing homelessness as members of families with children. Between 2021 and 2022, sheltered homelessness increased by 7%, or roughly 23,000 people. Going on to the next page. So what's happening now? Continue. Unemployment is a major cause of homelessness, and this is from Gabriel 2020. In Los Angeles County, 46% of unsheltered adults cited unemployment or a financial reason as a primary reason why they are homeless. Researchers have estimated unemployment rates among people experiencing homelessness ranging from 57% to over 90% compared to 3.6% for the general United States population. Being unemployed while experiencing homelessness also makes it difficult to exit homelessness, and people experiencing homelessness face a range of barriers to employment. I'm going to cut the card there. That's just saying that unemployment is a major reason why homelessness exists. I'm going to go to page 7. Why is it a problem? Well, people experiencing homelessness have a higher risk of dying. Meyer-Wise Lagani, 23. Our main finding is that the non-elderly people who have experienced homelessness face 3.5 times higher mortality risk than people who are housed. Homelessness is associated with 60% greater mortality risk than poverty alone. We estimate that a 40-year-old homeless person who has a mortality risk similar to a house person who is nearly 20 years older and a poor house person who is nearly 10 years older. I'm going to cut the card there and move on to the next one. So this just is the plan and the solvency on page 8. All right, so here's our plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase fiscal redistribution by guaranteeing a job to all people in the United States, period. 1AC solvency, how the plan solves the problem. Only jobs provide enough income for people to pay rent and avoid homelessness. National Alliance to End Homelessness. A reduction in work hours, a lost job, an illness, or an unexpected expense can spiral into an inability to pay rent, an eviction, reliance on an extended family for a place to stay, and sometimes entry into a homeless shelter. Income support programs help many people withstand economic crises. Often, people experiencing homelessness find these programs to be inaccessible, and the benefits offered may be insufficient to help them achieve stability. I'm gonna cut the card there, and I will stand open for cross-sects.
All right, great. Thank you, Josh. So I think because it's a Coach PD, if anyone has any questions about what Josh read, it would be great if you want to just like type them into the chat, and we can maybe highlight one or two coach questions for our cross-examination. I think that'd be a really great way to get coaches involved.
I like that.
So if we have any questions at all for Josh about the 1AC, that would be great. Just put them right in the chat and then I can read them out.
Don't be shy now.
All right, so not seeing any questions, that's totally okay. So just for the purpose of making sure we have some cross-examination here, I'm gonna give a couple example questions that could be asked to Josh about what he read. The idea with these questions that I'm gonna ask are, I'm gonna try and set up arguments that I might make in my first speech as the negative side. We're going to do open cross-examination, which means either Rainer or myself on the negative side can ask, and either Douglas or Josh can answer. And actually looks like we do have a question in the chat now. So Josh, coach asks, do you have any information as to why those experiencing homelessness lost their jobs?
In our more advanced package, there's more information around this, but for this debate, no, I do not.
Okay, so I'll follow up as a onto that point to set up a point that I'm going to make in my next speech. I'm going to ask you, Josh, are there more causes of homelessness than just people losing their job?
And as a debater, I would answer, of course there are, but unemployment is the biggest reason why they're homeless. Just kind of also trying to make sure I slightly reinforce my point before he goes into his.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. So I'll give the first negative constructive speech, and then Douglas and Rainer can follow up. So hi all, my name's Roger. I work for the Boston Debate League. I'm going to be representing the negative side in this debate. And a quick roadmap, which is explaining what arguments I'm about to make for the judge that doesn't count against my speech time. I'm going to give two pieces of evidence on the negative side of the case to explain, to go against Josh's plan. And then I'm going to give a third piece of evidence, which is going to introduce a counter plan, basically a negative plan to solve the problem of homelessness that Josh has highlighted. So I'm going to get started. Here we go. So, let me actually share my screen while I do this. Hang on just a sec. All right. Can people just give me a thumbs up if they can see this? Excellent. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start here on, this is page 22. One reason that the affirmative team is not going to solve this problem is that many people experiencing homelessness already have a job and already receive government assistance. This is from Meyer et al. 21. More than half of people residing in homeless shelters in the United States had formal earnings in the same year they were homeless. Among unhoused individuals who were not in shelters, about 40% had earnings from formal employment. Even consistent work isn't enough to help Americans facing skyrocketing housing costs. And I'm going to cut the card there, although the rest of the evidence is good as well. This card is basically just saying that having a job and receiving government assistance does not solve the problem. There are plenty of people who are homeless right now who have a job. 40% are already receiving money from a job. So having a job clearly is not going to solve homelessness. And my next card is going to be page 25. So a job guarantee would make it hard for low-wage workers to find a job. This is Ozimic 18. If the job guarantee ends up with 20, 30, or 40 million workers instead of 10 million, that's massively expanding the size of the government. The problem is what this will do to the size of the government. Right now, there are about 21 million federal, state, and local government workers in the US. 10 million more jobs would increase government employment by a whopping 50%. If only 10 million private sector jobs are crowded out, it would double the size of the government. We should expect that the bill will approximately double as well. And I'm going to cut the card there. This card is saying that the idea of guaranteeing a job to everyone sounds nice, but putting this into practice is going to be very, very difficult. If we had 20 million people getting jobs because of this, if they choose to get a job from the government rather than a private job, then we're going to double the size of the government, which means essentially we would have to double the size of the taxes that people are paying to raise all the money in order to cover the cost of this program, right? The government budget would double. And finally, I'm going to introduce a counter plan. So this is on page 28. State and local governments should increase funding for affordable housing so that all people who need affordable housing have access to it. And the solvency is that states can offer money and easier applications to help build needed affordable housing. This is Young 22. Local governments are perhaps best positioned to reform policies that limit the supply of housing. State governments can also play a significant role in increasing housing production and preservation and improving housing affordability. Affordable housing production relies on tax credits, housing bonds, private equity, and grants. Accessing these financial options often requires separate and complex applications. A state can help expedite the process. So there are a number of reasons why affordable housing can help reduce homelessness, but my argument here is that local and state governments actually would have a very easy time of increasing the amount of affordable housing and thus reducing homelessness, simply by making the process for applying for affordable housing easier and the process for creating affordable housing easier. State governments can do a lot to increase the amount of affordable housing that exists and thus reduce homelessness. And that's my speech. So again, we'll take any coach questions. If you have them, drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear your questions.
All coach questions are welcome. No worries if you're shocked. While folks are thinking, so as negative counter plan, more explanation. Oh, you would want me to ask a clarifying question about the counter plan?
So like how we would institute the counter plan, does it have to be the first negative affirmative, or could it be the second negative affirmative?
Oh, yeah. Are you asking when it can be brought up? Like when someone would bring in a counterplan?
Yes, yes.
Usually it would be in the first constructive affirmative so that the rest of the debate can like interact with it. If you bring it in the second negative, it's really cheap. It's really not fair.
Yeah, the first negative speaker should bring up
Yep.
the counter plan. And the main reason is because it's going to be the primary argument that the negative team will make throughout the debate. They want the judge to vote for that counter plan instead of the affirmative team's plan. So you want to bring it up in your very first speech so that you can spend the rest of your debate explaining why it's a good idea. And again, as Josh mentioned, it's also just a bad practice and bad habit to bring it in the second negative speech, because the affirmative will have already made all of their constructive speeches at that point and wouldn't have the appropriate amount of time to respond to the counterplan. And a question, Josh, you want to ask me just maybe one clarifying question about the counterplan, and then we can move on to the next speech?
Yeah, I guess here is I would just ask a question of like mechanism. So how do you intend to actually get the states to enforce this?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, like I said, there's not a lot that a state really needs to do. It's a very low lift. You could easily make the application process easier and people would just want to build more housing. It wouldn't cost any money at all.
True. Okay. Oh, we got a coach question. So, coach asks, would there be any consequence in your plan if local governments didn't participate?
I would say that it's possible, right? Some local governments have even more power than the state governments in terms of applications and zoning and that kind of thing. So it would be difficult, but my counter plan is for the local government to do this, right? My suggested policy that I'm saying solves the problem is for local and state governments to make affordable housing easier to build. All right, so next we're going to move on to Douglas, who's going to give the second affirmative constructive speech. And Douglas, you can tell us kind of what you're going to focus on, and then read 2 or 3 pieces of evidence would be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Hello, everybody. I'm Douglas Matute. Also work for the VDL as one of the program managers. I will be presenting the second affirmative speech. And just to give you a little quick roadmap of what I'm going to be focusing on, in this speech, I'm going to reinforce what my I was a colleague, and then I was like, we're supposed to be the debater. So as my colleague Josh explained earlier, and I'm also going to add pieces of evidence as to why this is a problem. And I'm going to extend and expand as to how our plan helps to solve the problem. So I'm going to start my own time right now, and I'm going to start on page 10 on a Harman section as to why is this a problem. Survival. People who are employed have much better chance of surviving a 6-month period. We find that people who are employed 34.6% less likely to die in a 6-month period than those who are not employed. These findings show that even among people who have experienced homelessness, those who are more economically disadvantaged and more disconnected from the formal labor market have far worse health outcomes. So you can see a connection, right? That not having a job affects the health of people as well. I'm cutting the card there and I'm moving to the next card on page 11, proposing a solvency extension and how the plan tries to solve the problem. Employment programs in many places have reduced homelessness. The importance of providing employment and opportunity as solutions to homelessness have been ignored. Of the more than 560,000 people experiencing homelessness in America, an estimated 78% are jobless or underemployed. Works benefits the community at large because of its business-centric approach and its visibility, offering citizens proof that when given an opportunity, non-disabled people experiencing homelessness can and will seize the opportunity to work. In here, I'm presenting an evidence that shows that there's a program that has effectively showed that giving jobs to people help them stay out of poverty and homelessness. I'm cutting my card there and I'm moving to page 12. Solvency extension. Most Americans support a federal jobs guarantee. This is by Darian Hilton, 2018. The idea of a federal jobs guarantee is neither new nor radical. President Franklin D. Roosevelt states of the Union addressed in 1944 introduced an economic Bill of Rights. The first article of his proposed second Bill of Rights was the right to employment. After Roosevelt, Martin Luther King demanded immediate employment for everyone in need of a job. Recent polling data reveals robust majority of Americans support a job guarantee. This majority holds across all 50 states and across all racial groups. So this evidence is showing us that the idea of giving jobs, federal jobs to people, it's not outdated, it's something that has been in progression for many years, and the major part of the population approves of these programs. I'm coding my card and I'm moving to page 13. Job programs can provide training, specifically for unhoused people. Major Richard Berry of Albuquerque, New Mexico, has been working to create a new kind of job opportunity program. Through the program, a van is driven around that offers to pick up visible homeless individuals to go do day labor. Workers get paid above minimum wage. St. Martin's also offers a variety of other services that homeless or poor people can take advantage of, meaning that the job opportunity is part of a large system of support to get folks back on their feet. An organization in London called Change Please drives a fleet of coffee trucks around the city and staffs them with people struggling with homelessness. In working on a Change Please trucks for 6 months, baristas learn valuable skills that help them gain more permanent employment in the future. I'm going to cut my card there and I'm going to explain a little bit of what I just read, right? This last piece of evidence shows that if we give the opportunity to people who have the time, patience, and ability to learn, they will learn the skills and they're going to apply them, right? Transfer of skills. With having the majority of population voting pro guaranteed jobs, we can create opportunity and spaces for homeless people to get a job and proceed to better their lives. As I read in my previous evidence, people who have jobs tend to live 6 months longer than those who don't. Yeah, and those were my 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, great. And then I'm going to actually ask you to read just one quick piece of evidence as well on the answer to the counter plan, for example. Could be any of these.
Yes, let me jump into it. Solvents extension. Okay. I'll read the first one. That's on page 17. Why the counter plan doesn't solve the problem. Developers can afford to build affordable housing. That should be on page 17. It turns out building affordable housing is not particularly affordable. In fact, there is a huge gap between what these buildings cost to construct and maintain and the rents most people can pay. Developers rely on loans and other sources to fund construction before people move in and start paying rent. But developers can only get loans and equity sources if the development will produce enough revenue to pay back the loans and pay returns to investors. The gap between the amount a building is expected to produce from rents and the amount developers will need to pay lenders and investors can stop affordable housing developments before it even begins, leaving few options for the million of low-income families looking for safe, affordable homes. And the problem is more difficult. I'm gonna cut the card there. Thanks.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Douglas. And so now we'll go into the next cross-examination. If any coaches, again, have questions for Douglas about any of the answers that he read to the Affordable Housing Counter Plan at the end there, or on the opposite side, any of the extension cards that he read about why his federal jobs guarantee would work, now is the time to submit those in the chat.
I don't know if I have to say this, but those obvious questions that you have in your head that you feel like, that's a question I wonder if that's a question you should ask too. I don't know if I have to say that, but I am going to say that because sometimes I feel like if a question is so obvious, I don't want to ask it because I feel like, oh, well, the answer is so obvious that why even ask? But you'll find that those obvious questions aren't as obvious as you would believe, especially in a debate round.
Ooh, and there's a question in chat. What will happen if loans were guaranteed by the government? If the loans were guaranteed by the governments, as you can see, there's already a hard time for them to be approved by loans, and they just want to make sure that the loans get given if they can get the money back. If the loans were to be guaranteed by the government, then there might be a moment in which the government might have to cut money from certain organizations, or might be able to have to pull out the money from somewhere else. If they're already having a hard time going to private loan lenders, I can imagine the government having a harder time to sustain a loan system for a long period of time for the developments to be done, especially if the government will not get that money back based on the cost of building the affordable housing versus the amount of money people will be able to pay back.
All right.
That's a good
great.
question, though.
I agree. And you could ask all sorts of different questions. You could ask about, the scale of some of the examples that Douglas read about, or, the cost of different things. But for now, we're going to move right into the last question. The last speech, the second negative constructive. Rainer, do you feel ready to go for that?
I am, yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and just tell me what pages you're reading as you go so I can put them up for the recording.
I actually think I have a older version that's open, but they probably have about like one page, but it's the same tagline.
Oh, gotcha.
But I'll just tell you the tagline. Am I are we keeping time, or are we just not keeping time?
No, not keeping time here. I can drop the version that is I'm using. Hang on one sec.
But Raina, that don't mean go for like 10 minutes.
No, I'm gonna keep my own time just in case, so I can know if I'm within the 3-minute period, so that's not excessive or too short. All right. Yeah, whenever we're ready, I can get started.
Okay. Yeah. So just tell me if you read the tagline, I think, or just tell me kind of generally where it is. I can track it down.
It's in the negative. It's like starting around page. It's the first card I'm going to read is the plan is very expensive and inefficient. And then the second one is a lack of affordable housing causes homelessness, not poverty. The third one is if a job guarantee replaces other programs, it could force people to work for government benefits. And the last one is that affordable housing reduces homelessness and is cheaper than emergency care.
Okay. And so this can happen as well with sometimes with packets and different versions. Every so often it does happen. So Rainer, if you could also just, when you read the author and the date, I'll make sure I match up the citation with the card that you're reading as well, in case the tagline is slightly different.
Yep. So I just had to make sure the charger was nearby just in case. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Can I start now?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, before I actually go into the cards, hello everyone. My name is Rainer Fargas, also work at the VDL. Yeah, so I'm going to give the second negative constructive. Before I start, I just like to kind of give an overview of where we are in terms of like in the debate so far. The affirmative team kind of outlined what the problem was, really talking about homelessness being a major problem. We accept that is a major problem. And their solution was that we should do a federal jobs guarantee so that people could work and pay, be able to pay rent so that we can solve the problem. But my partner already outlined, this is actually not going to solve the problem. What's really going to solve the problem is to actually invest more in building affordable housing so people can actually have housing. Why not address it head on? And so with the last speech, as you saw, the opponents came on and read a lot of cards really outlining like the problem. Furthermore, that employment programs in many places have reduced homelessness, which we're not contending that it hasn't at all. We're just saying like this is not the best way to address it, and that most Americans support a federal jobs guarantee. Also not contending that this is not the case. That is fine, and that jobs programs can provide training specifically for unhoused people. Also something that we are not contending. The main issue here, which has not really been addressed, is that our method of fixing the problem actually be more effective than their method of fixing the problem, which is just like they're trying to give people money, like trying to guarantee them a job so that they can hopefully be able to afford a place to stay. But my partner already outlined that you can be working, especially working minimum wage in an expensive city like where we live in Boston, does not guarantee that you're gonna have a place to live. So that is this is what you will being asked to weigh. Are you convinced that theirs is going to actually fix the problem? Or are you convinced that we're actually gonna address this more head on? So just going more into like some of the deficits of the plan, the first thing I'd like to highlight is that the plan is very expensive and inefficient, and that is from Born 18. Levy Economic Institute calculates that up to 16 million could take part in such a program, given the federal government would have to pay $15 an hour, the federal minimum wage, for full-time jobs, plus benefits equal to 20% of wages. Total labor costs per worker would be about $37,440 per year. That's before the cost of the materials for the programs and administration in the program itself. We are talking about a gross cost significantly higher than the existing Medicaid program. Again, whenever we talk about like a budget deficit that comes up every year, we're talking about entitlement programs. Now we're talking about something that's even bigger and inefficient at actually addressing the main problem that they're trying to address. Cutting the card here, moving to the next card. And then that one is that the lack of affordable housing causes homelessness, not poverty, just kind of reiterating what my partner already outlined. And scrolling here. So that is from DEMSAS 23. To explain the interplay between structural and individual causes of homelessness, some who study this issue use the analogy of children playing musical chairs. As the game begins, the first kid to become chairless has a sprained ankle. The next few kids are too anxious to play the game effectively. The next few are smaller than the big kids. At the end, a fast, large, confident child sits grinning in the last available seat. You can say that disability or lack of physical strength causes individual kids to end up chairless, but in this scenario, chairlessness itself is an inevitability. The only reason anyone is without a chair is because there aren't enough of them. The same case with housing. There just aren't enough housing available, and that is why we're really dealing with this main problem. Cutting the card here as well. The next card I'm going to go to is about the fact that if a jobs guarantee replaces other programs, it could force other people to work for government benefits. I'm highlighting this because obviously we don't have unlimited amount of money, so we would have to actually like decide, okay, which do we keep? And in this particular case, as we've already outlined, the case this being much more, the plan being super expensive, it would essentially force people to choose versus like what to fund. And then we think that what would happen is that the job guarantee would replace other programs, effectively making people have to work for government benefits, even the ones who don't have to do so right now. And that is from Dorfman 18. And just because of time, I won't go into the card. But as I've just outlined, we think, again, we're not contesting whether or not homelessness is an issue. We're just saying that we have a better method of actually addressing the main problem. And we just outline all the pros of our plan and also highlight all the deficits that their plan actually suffers from. None of them that they really address head on, except for to say in our case that developers can afford to build more affordable housing. We contend that is not true. Obviously, this is a market where there's more demand. If you provide the incentives, they would actually be able to build them. They've been building houses for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we don't see any issue why that would not be the case here, should the conditions on the ground be ideal, be conducive to something like that. That is my speech.
All right, thank you, Rainer. So coaches, last chance to ask questions. That was our last constructive speech, which means this is our last cross-examination. And then we'll have sort of a lightning round of rebuttals, just kind of some very quick overview points to show what the end of a debate might look like on this topic. But what questions do we have for Rainer about his speech? And Josh or Douglas, if you all have questions as well, I think just for time purposes, if you want to just ask one, that'd be great.
Douglas, you got a question?
No, not at the moment, do you?
I guess so. That'd be pretty maybe one of those obvious questions, but if affordable housing was so affordable, why don't we already have affordable housing as a solution for homelessness?
We don't have enough. It's just like any market. If you have more demand than supply, it's gonna drive the price up. So if you can increase the supply, you can reduce the price.
Oh, and here's another question from our coaches. Why do we need a profit on affordable housing?
No, we're not advocating for a profit for affordable housing. We're saying that by the plan that we're outlining, if you can fund it more, again, which is we're saying is underfunded now, you would increase the total number, right? So let's say right now, just using random numbers, like let's say there are 1,000 houses available, and I know a lot of people have heard of like the long lists, right? People you get on the list, you wait for years before you get one afforded to you. But if you could increase that from 1,000 to 10,000, imagine how much shorter that would change. How much shorter that list would be, and how many people could actually afford to have a place without having to force them to work to make minimum wage before they can even begin to think about affording a place.
Okay, thank you.
And
All right.
that's the question on how do we
See the second question? Yeah, I see it.
Oh, go
yeah, how
for
do
it.
we change the funding formula? Here it's really just talking about just dedicating money towards this. Like right now, essentially reallocating funds that's currently being collected and placing it towards this, making this a priority instead of the fact that it's not a priority. And also beyond our plan, thinking about more holistically once you start to see these things working, whether it's the zoning laws, which I think my partner already mentioned as well. But it will start there by just like making a priority and by putting more money towards it.
Yeah, and I would just add that in terms of the funding, we're actually not spending more money because the government spends tons of money on providing services and shelters and that sort of thing for folks who are homeless at the moment. And so we're actually advocating for something that would save the government money. Building affordable housing is much cheaper than continuously trying to provide services and temporary housing.
And just last question I see on there, another question. Thank you guys for putting them in there. Yeah, I would say the negative would totally agree with you. Making the process less cumbersome would actually be great. And part of that, if you think about, if you take the posture of like, we need to increase the number of housing by a lot, you are going to have to think about removing some of the red line in the process to actually meet those requirements. So if you're trying to build 10,000 extra houses, you would start thinking not just the money, obviously, but also start thinking about how do we make sure that we can get the money out the door as fast as possible. So we in some way, this is not contradicting what we're trying to do here. It's just really thinking about at the granular level what has to happen. So we agree with you.
All right, great. So thanks all. And so we're going to do, again, just a very short, about 1 minute each rebuttal from each of our 4 debaters here. And the negative side goes first in the rebuttal round. So that means that I'll be giving the first rebuttal speech. And just a quick overview of the purpose of each rebuttal speech. So the first negative rebuttal and the first affirmative rebuttal should try to focus on kind of giving an overview of the arguments that have been made by both sides and talk about kind of what they think they're winning in the debate. The second negative rebuttals on the affirmative and negative side will focus just on the key issues that they think the judge should be voting on, right? They want to leave a lasting impression in the judge's mind when they're making their decision as to what are like the 2 or 3 main points as to why they should win the debate. So hello again all, my name is Roger. I'm from the Boston Debate League representing the negative side. And I'm going to give just a small overview of this debate round in my rebuttal speech. So here we go. The affirmative team, as my partner has stated, has made many strong arguments about why giving people jobs is good. And we don't disagree with many of those arguments. We think that guaranteeing a job would be a great thing. Our major issue with it is that it is too expensive. And a secondary issue is that it might replace other great benefit programs that exist right now. So what we want to focus on instead is another solution that already exists that's just underfunded and really underutilized, which is affordable housing, right? The affirmative team says people just need more money. They need a job. So if they have a job, then they will be able to afford the skyrocketing housing prices and be able to afford homes. And we think that's crazy. We think no matter how many people are guaranteed a job, unless it's a very, very high paying job, which it will be impossible to do for everybody, then we can't guarantee that they'd be able to afford very, very high housing costs. What we want to do is bring down the housing costs, building more affordable housing, and that's how we're going to address homelessness. The other major issue that we see with the affirmative side is that they focus on guaranteeing a job, but not necessarily giving a clear example as to how this would work for everybody. We read a card that explained how it would be a huge problem if 10 or 20 million people took one of these jobs provided by the government, right? A lot of people in the private sector would give up their jobs. We'd have tons and tons of companies that wouldn't be able to find workers. And we would have to pay tons and tons more taxes in order to cover the cost of such a program. For affordable housing, we're actually going to reduce the government costs. We're going to make applications easier for people to build housing, for people to get housing, and we're going to save money because the money that would have been spent on support programs like temporary shelters and other support programs will just go into affordable housing instead, and that'll be a trade-off rather than a huge expenditure. And that's my speech. And so there are no cross-examination questions after the rebuttals. So we're going to go immediately over to Josh's speech, and he's going to give the first affirmative rebuttal.
All right. So this was a great debate from both sides. Again, I'm Josh. I represent the Boston Debate League's affirmative side on this debate, and I'm just going to talk about the two major points that was mentioned: the expense of our plan, and the fact that even if we got past this expense, that it's not a solve for all. The first thing is that we don't disagree that the initial cost of our plan isn't going to be expensive. We understand that we're asking for a lot of initial money up front, but what we're hoping for and what we know will happen is that over time, as we work and we establish these jobs, and one of the things that we did not say was that we were going to create minimum wage jobs. Nowhere in our evidence state that. And under that presumption that we would be creating livable wage jobs where people will be able to actually, live. It will initially cost a lot, but over time, the money that people will be earning will be that the taxes will absorb. It will actually go back into the economy. So the initial cost, yes, will be a lot, but over time, it will do a lot more for the economy, and it'll actually stimulate the economy in a lot of great ways. The second thing is that the idea of affordable housing, we didn't really get into this, but we really don't need a more affordable housing units. What we need is for people to get paid enough to fit into the housing that currently exists. And that's what the affirmative proposes that we can do by by providing a federal jobs guarantee to all people. Yes, a lot of people will take it, but that's kind of the point. And the benefits of it severely outweigh the economic stimulus, the giving people a livable wage so that they don't have to deal with homelessness. These are the things that are important, and these are the voting issues that that you should think about, whether you want to go with our federal jobs guarantee or the affordable housing plan of the negative. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you, Josh. And so now Rainer and Douglas will kind of hit us with just the major, 2 to 3 points from their sides of the debate to try and convince you to vote, or convince the judge to vote for them. So we'll turn it over to Rainer.
All right. Yeah, I'll just start by saying that the app is selling you a dream, but you don't have to buy the dream. Essentially, they're trying to convince you that, hey, if we just guarantee everyone a job, they'll all of a sudden be able to afford a home and we'll solve the homelessness problem. We're not contending that there is a problem. We're just saying this is not a great way to solve it. But we live in Boston, so let's use Boston as an example. Although the negative just said just now that they didn't never say anything about minimum wage, we have to assume, because the minimum wage usually is what they call the livable wage. They didn't give us a number, so we're gonna use a number for them because that's what they didn't give us a number. So imagine them making $15 an hour in Boston, working 40 hours, that's $600. a week times 4, $2,400. Factor in taxes, that's less than $2,000. Where are you? And then that's before factoring transportation, food, any other things you have. Where are you going to find a house to live in with that kind of salary? Thinking about that, right? Like before you factor in anything else, that's less than $2,000 for the year, for the month, right? So you might say, well, we might just live somewhere else. You might move out of Boston. One, that's displacement. Two, what do you think the landlords are going to do once they realize they have way more demands than they have supply than the supply? They're gonna increase the rent. So now everybody's gonna be like Boston. So yes, in some way, the negative is the affirmative is right. The money is gonna go back to the economy. It's gonna go to the pockets of the landlords because now they're gonna have more people looking for housing in a smaller pool, right? It's in the same pool where it's like you're gonna have more demand but the same supply. This is where we come in. We increase the supply. We don't just give them like a $15 an hour job where it's like saying go find a way to make this work. We're saying like, no, let's increase the number of housing actually available so we can actually address the problem head on. So for us, and the last thing I want to say is like, even if this was to work the first year, wages don't keep up with the rent increases. If you look at any graph, the rent increase happens way faster than the wage increase because the next time the minimum wage will increase will be way down the line before the rent increase. So even if you were to believe this would work the first year, it wouldn't work after that. So for us, we just want to focus on like actual solutions that will address the problem head on. And this is what we're outlining. Just build more housing, allow people to be able to actually afford it by increasing the supply and not just thinking about just the demand and keep telling them that, hey, this is going to give them $15 an hour and somehow, somewhere they're going to be able to find a way to make it work. This is essentially what it boils down to. Which solution do you think is actually going to fix the problem? And for us, it's been very clear that our method, our approach is actually going to address it head on, and their approach is very hopey changey, as somebody once said, and hoping that, you know, this somehow will make it back to the economy. But yes, we know where it's going to go. It's going to go to the landlords, and people are still not going to be able to have decent housing, and still not going to address the homelessness problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rainer. And then we're going to just move right over to Douglas to give our last speech here.
Well, thank you everybody for staying present to the last couple of minutes of the round. I will be presenting the closing speech for the affirmative team. I would like to point out that although the negative team made some really interesting points about the affordable housing and make it work and being a sustainable system, I felt that there was enough information for us to know exactly the quality of life the people will get in these housings if they can make it work. We're not talking about the sustainability of the houses, how long it's going to take, the maintenance and all that. In the affirmative plan that we are presented with an idea that allows the people to get the tools necessary to evolve and consistently keep getting better and better, right? One of the cards I read, I mentioned that the people would learn valuable job skills that would help them gain more permanent employment in the future. We are not proposing a system that allows people to have a house and stay in the house without the possibility of growth. We are proposing a system that allows people in tough situations to gain the skills necessary for them to keep getting better and better every day, and with the possibility of obtaining higher paid jobs as they go in more managerial positions. I believe the affirmative team should win this round because the plan might take a little bit more time to solve homelessness, but it will create an environment that motivates people around each other to keep getting better and get more jobs or better opportunities. Even in the negative evidence that we heard, none of them presented an idea of how long these people would stay in this type of housing, or the opportunities they have after obtaining the housing, whether of sustainability, something happens and they cannot pay the rent for the house or any of that jazz, while our plan creates the opportunity for those scenarios not to happen by giving the tools necessary to the community to keep going and keep getting better. That's why you should vote for the affirmative team.
All right, great. Thank you, Douglas. So this concludes our debate. And I think a few big takeaways that we want all the coaches to leave with here is that our hope is that with this evidence packet, that your debaters really dig into this idea that both sides fundamentally accept that homelessness is a major problem that needs to be solved. And the affirmative has a clear plan to solve it, and the negative has some cards that explain why they think that plan won't work. And if the debaters choose, the negative can also offer up this affordable housing counterplan. And the affirmative has some pieces of evidence to explain why don't they think that won't work either. So we think that there are a lot of good arguments here. We also think that there's a lot for your debaters to get creative about and really kind of make this case their own. And even like Rainer was explaining a little bit using Boston as an example, even tying it into what they know about the communities that they live in can be a great way to make some arguments about this topic as well. Douglas, Rainer, Josh, any comments before I close this out?
If y'all could have voted, I know y'all would have voted F. Thank you.
Shameless, I love it.
Shameless lies. But thank you guys for tuning in and watching us just kind of go back and forth on this. As Roger said, the main idea here is just to kind of give you a rough outline of what this could look like. Either case, if you were to flip this, we would obviously assume the different positions, and there are just enough arguments here where I think both sides can make a compelling case for why their side should be the side really talking about the solution and the solution that the judges should be voting for. So hopefully you guys got something out of this.
Yeah. I hope that you have fun watching this, and that the debaters have fun interacting with the evidence that we crafted. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, please do not hesitate to email us. Any one of us, Roger, Douglas, Rainer, myself. We do this for everyone in the community, but we definitely do this for the debaters. And any feedback to make this better for them is always appreciated. So thanks so much for coming here, and thanks so much for being a part of this debate with us.
Yeah, and just a quick plug, our next Coach PD is 3 days from now, Thursday, September 21st from 3:30 to 4:30, although that one will be much shorter because we'll just be reviewing Coach tools. That'll be covering Tabroom, the budget tracker, and the Coach portal. So if you are, especially if you are newer to coaching, or if you haven't looked at the Coach tools in a while for kind of keeping track of your team, that'd be a great session for you to attend, and it will of course be recorded and posted on our YouTube as well. So thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording here. If anyone has any questions, we'll stick around for a minute.